Hey everybody, Roxabox90 here with another EDH Commander game commentary. So this game is a Sigarda host of Herons versus Scion of the Earth Dragon 1v1 EDH Commander game. And in this one we're going to do, as we've done in past commentaries, I'm kind of going to just go off and talk about whatever relating to the game, as well as anything relating to EDH that comes to mind based on the game or around the game. So that's kind of how we're going to view it. So the game itself starts off fairly fast, but also slow in a sense in 1v1. Usually the decks themselves are built very differently than in multiplayer decks. So if you see my past 4-way video from the Commander 2013 Commander game, then you'll see this one is rather different. Because there, the game was much slower at the beginning, a lot of stuff just not going anywhere. Whereas here, every single turn just about matters in the early game, since much like Standard or Legacy or Vintage, anything of the like, you have two players with limited life totals, 30 instead of 40, because this game is going according to the French ban list, which has a number of rules, including in Dual Commander, which 1v1 is called, according to the so-called official list, is Dual Commander. You usually start with 30 life, and instead of 40, makes the games faster, makes aggro decks have a better chance of winning. In this case, Sigarda and Scion both are aggro decks, since they are Voltron decks. Sigarda and Scion of the Earth Dragon are both excellent commanders for Voltron. If you can get them out quick, get them out attacking, they do 21 damage, combat damage that is, then they win the game, and that's kind of what these decks are aiming to do. So if you see over on the left, Sigarda, piloted by Mike, is trying to get as much ramp as possible, get her out turn 3 or 4, and Scion is kind of doing the same thing, but also wants to add some control. And the bigger problem for Scion is that when it's a 5-color deck versus a 1 or 2-color deck, you're really fighting the ramp battle, because you need to get 5 different color access against a deck that pretty much doesn't have to worry about that, since it's running just 2 colors. And so Jacob doesn't really do a whole lot. He's just trying to get his land. So he's ramping. He's going to play shortly a Trace of Abundance, I don't know, this turn, next turn, pretty soon. That card also is a very good way of adding more mana, different colored mana. He focuses on having a wide range of options to deal with that. He also has a lot of things that tutor for shocks and revised duels in order to get himself multiple color combinations. Oh, here, Trace of Abundance, different color combinations. Sigarda really runs more monocolor, well, basic lands, not monocolored, basic lands, and is able to use a lot of different options to get easily the 2 colors she needs. The builds of the decks, for Sigarda is a much more powerful Voltron commander because she keeps herself alive much more readily than Scion does, but then again, the Scion deck also, with all the ramp and different colors has going, has a lot more of a toolbox to work with. There are more cards you can tutor for, and there are a lot more powerful creatures, enchantments, that do stuff not just Commander Voltron focused. Even though the deck itself is supposed to be a Voltron, it also has a Dragon tribal sub-theme that works very, very well with Scion and allows him to do quite well, as you'll see in this game. He works the Dragon tribal, actually, I think even a little more than he would normally try to work Scion. So as we see here, the game's progressed a little bit. We got some basic lands on Mike's side. Jacob has a whole bunch of different colors. He's been ramping quickly. Birds of Paradise, to see, is any of the 5 colors, so it's a really good card, unlike Lana Ralph, which would be nearly useless in the 5-color deck. And Sigarda herself, one of her biggest weaknesses is that she doesn't have haste, and Lightning Greaves gives her haste, even though you then don't need the Shroud since she's hexproof on her own. Core Haven's a really powerful land, and there are other options like it, including Maze of Ith and others, but I like Core Haven if you can run it, especially in this deck where it's 2 colors. It's very easy to get it working, because Maze of Ith doesn't tap for any mana. And in a deck where generally you want your ramp to get Sigarda out, you even need that colorless mana. You really do. And Maze of Ith just doesn't do that. However, Maze of Ith's ability is probably even better in a sense than Core Haven's is. It does make a difference in this game. If it was Maze of Ith, it probably would have shifted the tide at a number of different points. But Core Haven is still quite an excellent card, and I really like it in this deck. So that's why Core Haven is here instead of things like Maze of Ith. Maze of Ith is a totally fair option and would work very well in 1v1, but I think Core Haven's better in this deck. Okay, so Jacob's still trying to figure out. So he's taking some damage from Sigarda, and he has to really think about now his land base, because Scion's abilities work very well by tutoring up very powerful dragons in order to swing for full combat damage. And I actually have a deck tech for this deck that's fairly updated. But when Scion attacks, if you do the 2 colorless ability, he gets to search for a dragon and make Scion a copy, which allows him to do a lot of damage and has lots of cool effects. Here he's kind of stuck because I have the Birds of Paradise on Mike's side, which is me, which can block, but also I have Core Haven. So he has to get through the birds and he has to get through the Core Haven to do any damage at all, which is really annoying for a Voltron commander to have so many blockers. And he knows blocking Sigarda is a waste of Scion as well. So here he attacks. He uses the Flame Blast's ability, which is actually really lucky. Flame Blast often isn't that great, but here it's really great because it allows him to ping the birds before it can block, and then forces me, now I'm stuck with just Core Haven to deal with his Scion, which is actually a really smart move of all the dragons he could have gotten. Sigarda, on her own, though, is quite a monster, and one of the problems for most decks dealing with her, as I mentioned in my deck tech for her, is that there are very few cards that can handle her, especially in a 5-color deck, where since you have so many colors and you need so many different things to get your commander going, to get your land packaging going, you don't have as many awesome Wraths, and you don't have as many forms of removal that can deal with her. So really, I think Jacob only has maybe 3 or 4 cards that can effectively handle Sigarda in his entire deck. Bit of a problem. Here, Great Sable Stag is not the right card for this deck. It's not strong enough, I think, for this matchup. It's really only a killer in a mono-blue or blue-black matchup, but I didn't have the complete deck list at this point, and I still don't. So as you notice, the fetch lands that was up top, that was a proxy. Obviously, I have a number of Wooded Foothills, but they're in other decks that I didn't have access to at the moment. So trust me, I do have the Wooded Foothills just waiting as a proxy. Some of the other cards, though, are, like, Great Sable Stag should be something else, but Great Sable Stag fits the mold. Nothing really fits instead of fetches. Fetches are just that good. Great Sable Stag, though, here doesn't really do much because there aren't many spells that it would prevent it in a 5-color deck. And there are better things that it could have drawn than Great Sable Stag. But here it's kind of aggravating because while Jacob's still taking 11 commander damage, which means that I'm really on the way to taking him down with Sigarda. I mean, really, if I can get rid of the Scion, get some damage in, very close to taking care of Jacob. It's already on the way while I've taken nothing. And Core Haven's still in play, so there's not much that he can really do at this point unless he gets something to deal with the field. My guess would be a Wrath, and as you'll see, a Wrath is hitting play right now. That's really the only way to Earthquake to deal with Sigarda is Wrath spells, effectively in this deck. Though in many decks, there may be other options, including -X/-X. Humility, I think it was newly added to the ban list. I don't remember, but that card can definitely deal with her. And there are other ways of also just having stronger blockers or having ways of preventing her from hitting play in the first place. There's lots of ways to take her down, as this Wrath just did. The problem here is that Decree of Pain fully casted for 8, which Jacob did, gives him a full hand refill. And though I talk about this all the time for a lot of players who are new to EDH Commander, you have to keep in mind that card advantage really does make or break the game. In this game, this puts Jacob way ahead, drawing 3 or 4 cards from that Wrath spell. Not only does he clear the field, get rid of Sigarda's protection, but he also draws those cards, and those cards make a big difference in this sort of format because your hand size starts dwindling. As you'll notice on my end of the field, on Mike's end of the field, you start noticing that there's not as much to do because there's not so much card draw going on. He's just getting Sigarda out, and that's that. The card draw, though, is what puts someone into long-term advantage. It gives them long-term ramp. It gives them more board control. It just puts them in a much better position than someone who starts getting down to 1, 2, 3 cards and has to start top-decking and hoping for answers instead of having answers. Not a great position to be in. And card advantage is one of the most important factors when you're building a deck. In fact, Sigarda is supposed to have good card sorting, as well as tutors, as well as card draw, but nothing's really happening at the moment, which is kind of frustrating in the game. It's frustrating. Here, this is really interesting. Sigarda attacks. He uses Quicksilver Amulet, which lets you put a creature directly into play. It's kind of like a show and tell variant, but for his deck, since it's tribal, and he needs something that can do something over and over again with huge creatures, it's much more powerful than some of the other cheat effects that are one-time use or whatever. So here, he cheats his most powerful dragon in his deck into play, and kills Sigarda mid-attack, which is annoying because Core Haven doesn't even work here. It can't... See, Maze of Ith maybe can untap Sigarda and prevent the combat from even happening, but Core Haven doesn't work like that, which is why Sigarda has died again. This is the second time, I think, already putting her up to 9. I think she costs 9 now, which is quite a lot for Commander, especially in 1v1, where, as you see, unless you're having a lot of really consistent ramp, it's not happening. Dragon Tyrant costs, if you notice on the right here, Jacob is paying 4 red mana to keep it alive. Every single turn you have to pay 4 red mana, which is usually why Dragon Tyrant's used in combos and just dies. But in this game, Jacob decided to keep it alive, which is pretty smart, though, because it's such a big dragon and there's nothing else on the field that you can quickly win in a 1v1 match with this card, if all you're doing is dealing with one person. So he's dropping some more stuff. Spellskite is very interesting because he really has it here to protect his commander from any sort of spot removals, Path to Exile Scion, take it over, and Spellskite takes the hit, which is a really great use of Spellskite. But obviously, Mike can't have it because it has a blue Phyrexian mana symbol on it, and you can't have anything with mana symbols that are not green or white in the Sigarda deck, as per Commander rules. Spellskite, though, is able to make things retarget. So here, there's not an argument, but there's a discussion going on because Jacob is wondering, can the Core Haven be retargeted? Core Haven prevents the damage of an attacking creature, target attacking creature. Can it be retargeted to Spellskite? And the answer is, which come to an arrangement in a second if I remember right, the arrangement is that no, it can't. Core Haven doesn't work that way, and Spellskite doesn't work that way. Spellskite has to be attacking. The things that can target Spellskite have to be targetable to him. So if someone had Destroy Target Enchantment, you could not put that on Spellskite, making Spellskite, in this case, not able to take the Core Haven instead, unless they both attack at the same time, which now Jacob knows that he'd have to do something like that to make it work. Mike luckily gets Sylvan Library, though, which puts him in a very powerful position. Sylvan Library is a rather strong card for EDH Commander, particularly for decks that are having trouble with card draw, because it gives you a card draw option if necessary, and it allows you to card draw for 4 life per card that you draw from it. So the effect is basically a mini brainstorm, but then you can draw additional cards from it, which is very strong since it happens every turn unless you sort your cards. Survival is a great tutor and also shuffles your deck on whim, which is very important. But still, Mike has no cards in hand, or 1 card in hand, which is a bit of a difficulty. So he may use the Sylvan Library to draw additional cards, even if at the life loss. But here, in this case, his life loss is not the end of the world, since there's just a Dragon Tyrant in play, and that's it. So even losing a little life would be okay at this point. So here we're basically at mid-game, I guess we'd call it. Both players are very close. What Jacob realizes that when his Dragon Tyrant was tapped last turn, Mike could have played Sigarda. He did have 9 mana. Equipped her to Lightning Greaves and attack straight away, and this would have given him the game. It was a mistake on my part as Mike. As past Mike, this is my mistake because I should have done that. I miscounted my lands, if I remember correctly, because in these games I often am keeping an eye on the camera and general discussions. There's often distractions going on, so sometimes this happens where something will slip my mind that should have been obvious. But here, in this case, I miscounted my lands, and I was hoping that I could hold back to prevent another Dragon Tyrant attack with Core Haven, which was a mistake because the chances are basically nil that would have happened now that Jacob knows and can attack with Spellskite and the Tyrant. So this was a complete misplay. I should have won at that point, but I made a misplay. So instead, drew 1 card from the from the Sylvan Library and lost 4 life for that. And now Jacob's just adding more mana, kept his Tyrant alive, and he, if I remember right, he recast Scion because he's in a position of a lot of strength at this point. And even spot removal would be, it'd be quite difficult to decide if you want to kill the Dragon Tyrant or kill the Scion, given that both of them are key pieces to the field, and the problem, of course, also is Spellskite can block that. So instead, Mike uses Savage Summoning too late, since now Jacob has some blockers. Savage Summoning to get his Sigarda into play on Jacob's turn, giving Sigarda the ability to attack the following turn. It's a classic move, and that's part of the reason Savage Summoning is so good for this deck. In a position where an opponent's unawares and attacks with everything, this could give the game right there. So again, Sylvan Library is going on. In these sort of matchups, also another thing to keep in mind when you're 1v1 is that when you're going to be tutoring for cards, as past Mike will be doing imminently with his Thalia, dropping his Thalia for something, you have to think about, while you're thinking about the turn that things are happening, you do have to think long-term, because the life totals being low and the fact that both our commanders are Voltron means that technically our life totals, or the focus of our life totals, is on 21 life. It's even less than 30. The 30 life is almost there to eat up other things. So the life gain from Sylvan Library, or to take some of the initial brunt of the Voltron. But the 30 life, the real goal between these decks is 21 damage. And the extra damage, the extra life, the 9 extra life is generally irrelevant. Not always, because there are other win conditions in both these decks that don't involve the 21 commander. But you do need to think in 21 commander, which is why when I was tutoring, I went for the Wolfir Silverheart. So there were a couple of options I could have had for this. I could have gotten, I forget the name of the card. It's from Innistrad, the Innistrad block, and it forces 2 creatures to fight. So I could have had Sigarda fight Scion, kill Scion, and then would have been back at where we started, where he's waiting to replay Scion again. But then he would have just retargeted that to Spellskite, which means the spot removal is not really worthwhile. And could have gotten Silverblade Paladin for double strike, but the 6/6 double strike versus 6/6 double strike is pretty much the same, and it doesn't really give me a powerful, give me a 2/2 double strike, and that's nothing. Wolfir Silverheart gives me a 10/10 Sigarda, which is pretty much what I need right now. What is a mistake here, I think, this is after the fact, and often will come up in 1v1 because the games are a little faster paced, and so the thought process maybe is a little faster paced. I should have not been attacking as much as I was at the latter half of the game. I did not have the card advantage. Jacob still had a couple of cards in hand after controlling the board. I did not have the card advantage. He had Scion, he had Dragon Tyrant, and by attacking, I lost Sigarda again, who I could have used if it would have prevented Jacob from attacking, because between the Core Haven and Sigarda, I had my blockers to deal with the attack. And even if he attacked with Spellskite, then Wolfir Silverheart would have killed Spellskite that first turn. I would have absorbed the damage, and nothing else would have happened. So that was a big mistake on an overall strategy. I was a little too aggressive mid-game, and when you're playing in 1v1, mid-game strategy often is very different. Yes, in Sigarda 1v1, you really want to be aggressive, especially early game, but mid-game, it can get more complicated, and that's a big mistake that I made in this game, where I was too aggressive, and where it cost me my Sigarda, besides the fact that I wasn't aggressive enough when I should have been by playing Sigarda because of a silly miscount of land. But here, I had the field advantage. Amazingly enough, I did, if I had kept Sigarda alive as a 10/10, because then Jacob could not afford to attack me until he had overwhelming advantage, or he killed Sigarda. And the only way he could have killed Sigarda is by clearing his own field. So no matter what, it would have been a stalemate until I got something better to either remove his stuff or to just simply, have my creatures be more powerful enough to win the game. So that was a mistake. But despite all that, with the 8 attack from Wolfir Silverheart, Jacob's down to 4, which still puts him at a disadvantage. He really has to figure out a way to deal with the fact that I have Coraven and a 4/4 Silverheart, which would kill him if it got through somehow. So he can't just attack with everything. Except that he can, which is wise, because in Dragon Tribal, there are lots of really strong dragons that do lots of really cool effects. And building this deck, Jacob went through just about every dragon in the game, because it's 5-color, you can play just about anything. And he handpicked a number of dragons that some people might not have picked, but were a pretty good decision, at least for this game. And this, he used Mnemonic Wall just to get back his Wrath, I guess, as a backup plan. But his most important thing is right here. I believe he's going to get a card that will kill Silverheart and give Scion enough advantage and damage to set himself up for a win, which is what he does. Balefire Dragon. A lot of people don't think about this card when they think about Scion the Ur Dragon, especially in a really heavy aggro. But this card is insane, because if Scion actually gets through to deal damage, he pretty much wipes the field on his opponent's side, which is what he does here. Not that I have so many creatures and all, but even in other builds where you run a bunch of creatures, I'll say tokens, but there are other examples, this card can still often clear the field. You're not going to be seeing a lot of well, this is almost late game, but mid to late game creatures that are dramatically over 6 power in 1v1. It's just not going to happen. So that's what's going on here with Balefire Dragon. So the game itself, as you can see, is still, it's pretty close. I mean, Jacob really can't afford damage at all, and he has a blocker, but if he can get any flyer, Mike will win. I don't think he... No, I don't have enough for Sigarda. Sigarda's 11 mana. Can't play Sigarda, and he really just needs a flyer. If he gets a flyer with enough power, he can just, that's it, he'll win. And he does enough life even to maybe survive one more attack from Scion at this point in the game. He might be able to even survive, unless Jacob has a lot of mana. So Mike here is thinking, well, okay, Sylvan Library showed me nothing, which is true. I remember there was basically Darksteel Ingot and nothing stuff. Here, use Expedition Map to get a Cavern of Souls, main point being to shuffle the library. And again, the following turn, presuming that I would have lived at this point, I would have drawn another 3 for Sylvan Library and selected, hopefully, a win option. Or something. Even just a Wrath spell would have helped at this point. But I didn't know that Jacob had enough for a win con, which I think he uses in this game, in this turn, where he goes for Molten Steel Dragon, which is an insane combo dragon. It really is. And this card can often combo out with Dragon Tyrant, which shouldn't be underestimated. Dragon Tyrant is insane with Molten Steel, because you can layer the effects. If you use the triggers of the 2 abilities, you use the 2 and then use the 2, he retains the double strike even if he changes. So you end up getting, or it's the other way around, you get the +0. Yeah, you get the, sorry, the other way around. You get the Molten Steel, you get the +0 until end of turn, which gives the person, gives the +0 and then gets the double strike, which wins the game. So thanks for watching, everyone. If you want to see more Commander gameplay, tap the like button and leave your comments down below. And as always, RoxyBox90 signing out. I'll see you guys next time.